I've seen a lot of bankers, and I've seen a lot of cops. I've seen a lot of lawyers pull out all of the stops. I've seen a lot of children with their parents in their hands. I've felt a lot of women who refuse to understand. Well, I don't think I understand why we're making such a fuss. And I don't think I understand what's come of all of us. And I don't think I understand why we take this world for granted. I just want to get right back to Guitar Players Planet. You see it in the papers, you read it every day. The riots and the fire going on in South LA. The muggers and the government, they're all wanting the same thing. They take you for your money and whatever else you bring. Well, I don't think I understand why we're making such a fuss. And I don't think I understand what's come of all of us. And I don't think I understand why we take this world for granted. I just want to get right back to Guitar Players Planet. Take me. Guitar Players Planet. 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 Sunny skies, the smell of palm tree air. Looking back, I could never feel fair. The way that music has touched my soul, the way that the South holds its control. But I've got a new way to choose. I'm gonna start running back to the land of new. Oh, na na lost Lone Ranger. Can I break this spell?
Good evening, everybody. Oh, the clock went on. Man, the clock went on. There you go. Clock, go away. Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome to tonight's edition of AstroWorld TV. And we're more than pleased to have Warren Keller he's the author of the book, and I have it right here, Pixinsight. I'm sorry, Inside Pixinsight. Awesome book. Awesome astrophotographer. He wrote this book in 2016. This is actually the second edition, right, Warren?
That's
This is the first
the
edition. Ooh,
first
this is the
edition.
first edition. I'm sorry.
Second edition had the Pelican Nebula,
Correct.
I think, on it, and that was finished and released in early February 2019. But as I often tell people, Pixinsight is a rapidly moving target with constant changes. I remember, in fact, it was our mutual friend Ron Breacher that
Yeah.
said the enemy of good is better. And PI is just like I said, just a very dynamic, constantly changing object. And so, I hesitate often to promote my book at this point anymore. I really have I'm a very conscientious person, almost hyper conscientious. And even though I know a lot of work went into it and there's a lot of great information in there, particularly regarding pre-processing, right? Calibration, integration. There's been so many changes in that arena. And of course, the onset of the CMOS era, and just a lot of differences. So again, it's valuable. Is it worth the 20 whatever bucks you can find on Amazon today? Yes, but we know that there are more current things. At least they were 5 minutes ago.
And
Warren,
I
are you
just
when it comes to Pixinsight, I know it is, changing. Do you have are you part of what is it, WP for AP or AP for
IP for AP.
IP
Yeah.
for AP?
So
Are
yeah.
you
So
involved?
Yeah, so Pete Prue, my dear friend and partner, we are IP4AP.com. Started that in 2005, and really were Photoshop gurus for a long time. Covered some Maxim DL, some AstroArt, but then really became what we call Pix-centric with Pixinsight several years ago. And then I don't know, Tegan, if you're aware, but just to tell everybody, we recently moved IP4AP.com into
Correct.
mastersofpixinsight.com.
Yeah.
And we lost our host. Adobe decided to shut down Adobe Business Catalyst, which was our host, where we did all our email campaigns and hosted our movies and all of that. So we had to move, and we figured, since we're building things back up with this mastersofpixinsight.com, that we would combine the two. So there's still at this point separate services. MOP is, pay as you go, live workshops and recorded those workshops recorded, and IP4AP is still a subscription model per month or per year for that older material. But that said, with the onset of 1.8.8 days ago, I'm back at making some tutorials for IP4AP on our Reloaded series. So again, it's
Yeah.
moving target.
I was going to say that might be I guess that might be a way for you to put out relevant, new, and updated content as
Right.
Pixinsight
The
constantly.
workshops really, even though they're not scripted, they're not highly edited. And of course, I've always been a freak about very polished, professional type of presentation. But again, that stuff gets outdated quickly, and you put so much effort into it. So we do a pretty good job with the live workshops, and as you say, Tegan, it can be the latest and greatest, the very most current information.
Yeah, and I gotta tell you, I've been to I think almost all the first run of the Masters of Pixinsight tutorials,
Yep.
and let me tell you, even for everybody out there that thinks they know everything about Pixinsight, let me tell you, you're gonna find something from somebody on every single episode. It's amazing. You think you know everything about DBE, ABE, noise reduction, whatever. Go check it out because I've been a big proponent from for you guys from day one, and it's great.
Thanks a lot, Dan. We really appreciate that. And as I talked with you privately beforehand, in our own classes, our Ron Breacher and I are the teachers, and Pete Prue is our admin and our web guru and all of that. But Ron will say to me, or I'll say to Ron, "Hey, I didn't know you could do that," or that's something new. And I really kind of shy away from that expert term because again, it's so deep, and we all know what we know, but it seems like there's endless strata and levels. And of course, I'm the first to admit I'm not a math guy. I'm more the art, music type. But I embraced it. I got it. It makes sense to me. But I only know, I only go down to a certain level that is like, okay, I got it. This will work for me. I know how to use that. I know how to make the tools do the visual type of things that I'm looking for. And I've always been good at really explaining and imparting that in a simple way to people. But there are some really brilliant minds associated with Pixinsight, both directly, Juan and, what we call the P team, but also the third party folks, guys like us who are programmers or really scientifically minded who contribute a lot of those amazing scripts and working on even some of the mainline processes. So it takes a village, right?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I believe you and Ron, I don't know if Pete, but I pretty believe you two just recently have become Pixinsight ambassadors within the last year, right?
Yeah, it may be closer to you. You could be right. It could be a year and a half. I'm not sure. As some Tegan's a young guy. Tim's pretty young, but at our age, it's like the
Wait,
decade.
wait, 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 hold on a second.
I'll speak for myself. I'll speak for myself. It's not the year. It's like it's not what year was that anymore. Now it's like what decade was that? Where it's really difficult keeping track. But yeah, it's been at least a year. So we're both on the P team as far as developers and also called Pixinsight ambassadors. Although I've managed to upset enough people out in TV land that I might have my ambassadorship stripped away from me.
I'm sure you'll be fine. But yeah, so how did I guess one of the questions I have is how did you and Ron and Pete actually make this kind of collaboration within each other? How'd you guys end up hooking up?
Well, Pete is what we call a serial entrepreneur. He's really a very successful business guy based in Buffalo, New York. And so if you're watching a Sabres game or a Bills game and you're looking at the signage, you'll see a company called Premcom. And so Pete is Premcom. And so big data and telephone and now cloud support company that does a lot of the business in Buffalo. He's a great guy. And we met, I believe, through the Starlight Express camera user group years ago. And
Wow.
I was living at a place that a lot of, at least the Eastern astro imagers will probably know of, which is Cherry Springs
Sure.
State Park, which is it's actually literally the second darkest spot east of the Mississippi. And I had moved out there and actually was going to be doing my very first presentation at a Black Forest star party along with Terry Dickinson. And I was excited about that. And Pete asked if he couldn't come up and spend a day with me looking at probably at that point AstroArt Photoshop. And so we became fast friends, and he heard the talk and thought, wow, there's a business here, and it really was a point where no one had yet released any DVDs. There were no online streaming, kinds of services, and YouTube was a lot smaller than it is today. So he had an idea for an online based streaming tutorial service. And again, we started with the Photoshop and the other things, and have been going ever since 2005. Ron Breacher, Canadian fellow, and he was a customer of ours. He was a client and contacted me about maybe getting some introductions into the circuit as far as speaking at star parties and conventions, conferences and such. And he presented me with some excellent feedback that he'd gotten from presentations he'd done in Canada. So I was more than happy to make some introductions for him. And then, through the IP for AP video tutorials, he really became very good very quickly, and became a real, proselytizer for us and stuff. So it's funny, we were friends like what we're doing here now. We were friends, virtual friends on Skype, and we'd be very serious with one another. I'm looking at this guy, I'm American, he's Canadian, and we were very stiff. We really weren't joking around much or anything like that. But when I was invited to go do this CAPS, it was called Canadian Astrophotography School, he and I taught Pixinsight in Ontario. And I stayed at his house, and I was like, oh my gosh, we're the same person. We're kind of the same ethnic background. We got the same sense of humor. We're both musicians and totally into the Monty Python thing and everything. So we totally clicked, and it was like, geez, after a year of thinking I had to, and I thought he was Ron Brecker for a year.
I called him that I've been butchering his name for like a year.
Well, not really. I told him it's like those drugs. It's like Humira. It's like you an I doesn't do that. You can't say Humira. It's Humira or Humira, right? But they decided, and so his family decided that Brecher, which is an Austrian,
right,
name, that it will be Breacher. Well, there's no way you get Breacher out of Brecher. So we don't have to feel bad. It was a choice made by his ancestors. But anyway, he got so, and then I asked him to be the technical reviewer on the books inside Pixinsight, and he was all about that and worked really hard with me, contributed a good amount. And so really, like I said, very fast friends. And then with this Masters of Pixinsight, this was kind of Pete's vision and something that he really would have liked, for instance, Rogelio Bernal Andreo and Adam Block to have joined us and kind of be a one-stop shop of Pixinsight experts. But everybody went their own way and did their own thing, which is fine, and they've done well with it. But Ron joined us, and so that's how the holy trinity of Pixinsight came to be.
Yes. So you're actually the last of the Trinity to come join us of Ron, Pete, and yourself. Mostly my fault because I'm the guy that calls everybody. But I'm glad you definitely came down and made time. So our viewers appreciate it, and apparently Tom Bramwell appreciates it because he's on. He's in the chat, and he actually wanted to say hi to you and let you know that Prima Luce appreciates the help with AIC. So,
well, yeah, we're thrilled to be having Filippo and Tom back with Prima Luce Labs. AIC will be May 2022 in San Jose, and so yeah, I was a vendor, for years. I was with Attic CCD and QSI, and I've been, a consultant to Celestron. And I've run some astro imaging shows myself. And now, for the last several years, I'm the exhibitor coordinator for Advanced Imaging Conference. So I know all of these people and really have counted them as really good friends, at least good acquaintances. But some of them many of them really good friends, having been in that circle myself. So it's been nice.
Yeah, that's awesome. Tegan, you got a question, or Scott? I've been doing a lot of the talking.
Yeah. Go ahead, Tegan.
I feel like I could pick your brain as far as Pixinsight is concerned all day. Um, it's a software. I've been using Pixinsight for, I'd say, 3 years. I feel like I know it like the back of my hand. I feel like I can close my eyes and I can process a photograph in my head. I feel like that's how often I use Pixinsight. Um, is the Masters of Pixinsight? I know Dan's mentioned that nearly every single episode um, that he watches, he learns something new, and I'm at the point where I want to learn something new. Everything on YouTube is, I guess, familiar to me. Are there any specific episodes in regards to more advanced post processing techniques that you could recommend?
Well, we did the newbie series, and then we did some specialized classes, dialing down the noise, dialing up the detail, really kind of digging deeper into those
Nice.
very critical tools, right? And so take a look at the website, mastersofpixinsight.com. You'll see some of the backlog of recorded videos that we've done. To be honest, I think our workflows are pretty streamlined at this point. We've been doing it for a while, and while we're always interested in new information and bigger and better, I got a very defined set of processing icons. Something we've been sharing since the beginning with readers of the book and IP for AP customers, and what we like affectionately call MOP, Masters of Pixinsight customers, and be glad to share that really with anybody. But for anybody that's really new to Pixinsight, and I can share my screen at any point, but you're able to create these new instance icons with canned settings that are customized to your workflow. And I was able to, over time, that evolved and really defined a nice set. And I use that 90% of the time. Occasionally, I'll reach for something that I don't use a lot. Last night on our photons to photos that we did for Masters of Pixinsight, I used StarNet, right, to remove the stars, and did like a starless processing workflow, and then put them back in at the end. So StarNet's not something I use a lot. Occasionally, I'll turn to something different. But again, that workflow is so evolved for me that I don't have to go too far afield of it to get the kinds of results that I'm looking for. It's like anything. It's like all of these softwares, be it Photoshop or anything that's specific to astronomy. There's redundancy after redundancy. There's 3 and 4 different ways to basically do the same thing. And so I'll generally say, look, as a teacher, I might need to know at least 2 or 3 of those 3 or 4 things. But as a user, I always encourage people, once they've found something that works for them well, that makes sense to them, don't drive yourself crazy. Don't reinvent the wheel. Don't worry about, there's 150 plus processes and scripts, right? And yet if I showed you my icon set, it's relatively small.
Yeah, I mean, you got your first question from our sick co-host Eric. He says, "Hey Warren, looking back on the many changes of Pixinsight over the years, can you select 1 or 2 modules or scripts that you think were real game changers of the software?"
Well, let me take a look. I mean,
take a look at the list.
One thing that immediately comes to mind is an outside third-party script. If anybody's familiar with Hartmut Bornemann, German fellow, and Herbert Walter, his Austrian friend, hosts all of his scripts. So look for Herbert Walter's Astro Imaging website, you can get the entire repository of Hartmutt's scripts. Or I'm a minimalist, I'll just grab what I like. But I think about that game script,
Yeah.
right? The interactive galaxy editing script. Now, I'm not going to lie and say that I don't value and go into Photoshop as a fine finisher. But as far as masking and Pixinsight, if it's something you want to be able to stay in and do all of your work in, I would say that the game script was a big, as I said in the tutorial, a game changer, because it really lets you almost paint and makes mask making much easier. That's a tough question, Eric. There's so many things. I'm looking down my icon set. I mean, certainly, WBPP,
Mhm.
weighted batch preprocessing, just keeps evolving, and it's so powerful at this point. It can be a little bit intimidating now because it's not that simple module that the original BPP, batch preprocessing, was, right? It's pretty cut and dry, get your work done. Of course, things have gotten more complicated, right? Now we've got CMOS, we've got flat dark type of processing instead of bias
Yep.
frames in the mix. And so you had to accommodate some of that stuff. But yeah, the advancements of WBPP would be up there. The game script would be up there. I'm just, again, looking down the icon set. A lot
What's
of the
the
stuff,
script? I'm not familiar with that one.
You don't,
what's
oh,
that? The
Tegan's not
game,
The
familiar with the
game
game
script.
script.
yeah,
Yeah.
you want to get that, again, Herbert Walter,
Yeah.
Pixinsight scripts, it'll say, and you'll find a whole repository that you can sync to, or you can just pull down the JavaScripts on anything you're interested in. But
It's pretty awesome.
looking
You have the
looking
LinkedIn?
here under utilities, the game script, he's got a few really nice scripts, really useful scripts. And now,
What's
there are
masking?
these third party for pay. I'm not really familiar with the fellow. I think his name is Russell, who's doing Star Exterminator and
Oh, yeah.
some type of gradient removal tool.
Hmm.
And then somebody asked us about that last night, and it's kind of my feeling that, at least to use the tools effectively, and I'm not saying to understand what's under the hood, or be able to speak about the algorithm behind it. I'm just talking about using tools effectively in a simpler way, which frankly is what I do. Then I think once you're given what I call the keys to the kingdom, some information, pointing you in the right direction, something I call context and chronology, the what to do and the when to do it, right? I think once you've given those things and you're pointed to the tools that really are going to matter the most, and learn to use them in a uh, fairly simple way, that it's not that hard. And every time somebody introduces a time saver, you kind of have to relearn that module. How do those sliders work? So at the end of the day, I don't want to take anything away from any, developer trying to make a little bit of gelt from third party plugins at
Sure.
all, because some of them may be really good. But um, but again, I don't feel compelled to want to relearn tools when I understand how to do it in PI in a fairly simple way. But yeah, Eric, that's a kind of a tough one. There have been a lot of additions over the years, and a lot of tweaks and changes to existing stuff. I mean, certainly if you want to go back a ways, TGV denoise is
Hmm.
new as compared with NR, and that's a great nonlinear noise reduction tool. MLT, multi-scale linear transform, which is the later, newer version, replacing true wavelet transform, and I think even kind of surpassing median transform. Um, let's see, I'm kind of losing that one. Um, multi-scale median transform. So for me, MLT is kind of the later grader, and that's so powerful for both linear noise reduction and for post-processing, sharpening, and for special techniques too. But lots of good stuff. I mean, should I share my screen
Yeah,
for a
sure.
moment?
Yeah, knock yourself out. Go ahead.
Just gonna click this one. Bada bing, bada boom.
I'm
Hopefully,
gonna make you big
There it
here
is.
at this point. There we go.
yep. So so that's my current icon set. And again, for anybody that's new, these are created very simply. Each process has something called a new instance icon, which can be used to drag and drop onto an image view, but it also can be drag and dropped onto a desktop. And you can name that and store a description in that. Point being that rather than when you're processing, rather than going through a pretty intimidating list of processes and also scripts, right? Lots of stuff here.
Yeah.
You can build an icon set, not only convenient to just double click and open, but these icons actually store your specific settings. And so when you come to certain settings that work for your data and you've tweaked those settings and it seems to be useful for a lot of your stuff. So watch, if I reset the tool globally, bam, you've got this configuration. But if I double click my particular icon, watch everything populate with particular settings that I'm using. And whenever you change a setting, you grab that new instance, you drag it back over your existing instance. It asks you, do you want to replace that? And then we have to be careful to actually save that process icon set or individual process icon or icons out with a save process icons, which you can do in a couple different ways. But again, as I'm moving through a process, these are very chronologically placed for me. Channel combination to get a monochromatic red, green, and blue together, cropping a luminance image, doing background modelization with dynamic background extraction, doing color calibration. I like the good old color calibration, linear noise reduction with MLT. When we get into masking, which is a very important thing, we've got the star mask process and the range selection process. Deconvolution can be useful at times. Histogram transformation to delinearize the image, or as an alternative, mask stretch to stretch or delinearize an image, brighten it so that it can be, viewed in outside software. Let's see, LRGB combination for monochrome, combining luminance with chrominance. We talked about TGV denoise for nonlinear smoothing, small scale smoothing, kind of a fine finisher. HDRMT for more high dynamic range images to really compress those bright cores and bright nuclei, bring out lots of detail. Using MLT again for sharpening, as I mentioned, local histogram equalization for boosting contrast, curves for anything from increasing color saturation to really drawing out an image with curves, very similar to Photoshop. Anybody that's used to that. Color saturation tool for specific ranges of color, SCNR, subtractive color noise reduction, oftentimes can get rid of a green residual in an image. Morphological transformation to shrink our stars when it's appropriate, to make a nebula, let's say, speak a little bit. Real quick little kind of a mini curve with exponential transform. Convolution to blur masks. Clone stamp to clean up artifacts. Rotate, some pixel math expressions canned here for adding hydrogen alpha in or getting rid of dark model in a background. And finally, ICC transformation to convert to an sRGB profile before you share a JPEG or whatever. So again, it's a very chronological thing for me. I tend to be regimented. I tend to be a little obsessive and keep things clean. Everybody's different. Some folks are very artful and just have things thrown all over the desktop, whatever works for you. I tend, again, to keep very organized, and even you can see the placement of my little icons, which every time I get a little gap like this, it bothers me. I say, oh no, I need to reload it and restore my little lineup of things. But these are very powerful. Keeps you, again, from having to fish through, like, in Photoshop. Although I knew it quite well, I always use that expression, kid in a candy store. I kind of felt like a kid in a candy store with Photoshop. What should I do now? I'll throw some of this at it. Not everybody's going to take to PI, Pixinsight, but it does have a very logical, regimented chronology of, you should do this now because it makes sense to do this, right? In the linear space, before we even stretch an image, we can see that image so well that we are able to do all kinds of repairs and all kinds of improvements before we even do delinearize it. So I don't know where I'm off on a tangent somewhere.
No, that's fine. Listen, we do that well on this show. We go off on tangents constantly. So, but I guess since you're in there already, and I know that you and I spoke offline regarding this about and it's come up about 3 times over the last couple of shows. The HDR multi-scale and the HDR composition.
Right.
Maybe you could show like a quick run through on kind of how to do that. I know you have a little something prepared for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So nothing fancy.
Yeah.
A couple of luminance images here of the M42, and the goal is trying to get the extended detail that was gotten with this 300-second exposure and blend it with the trapezium detail that was gotten with some 10-second exposures. And there are, various ways to achieve this with masking and such. But the easiest way is to take advantage of this gradient HDR composition process, and that's exactly what it's designed for. And honestly, you hear a lot of HDR bantered about in astro imaging. In reality, the stuff that we image, so dim, right? So very dim. So unless we're literally talking about M42, possibly M31, something like that, this is not going to be something that we're going to use a lot, but it certainly does a good job for something like this. And this is one of those processes, and it's an older process in PI that requires you to add files from disk. So many of the processes let us add views, right? Add open working images, but this doesn't let us do that. So we would have to navigate out to disk and load from your computer. And you're able to invert the selection to experiment, but normally you don't have to do anything at all with this at all. And since this is one of the processes that would work on more than one image at a time, in a sense, a batch process, you'll see this blue ball, which is the Apply Global. And that's what we do when we're trying to affect more than one image. And so there we go. So there's the before and the after. So we now have a composited image with the trapezium on the more extended nebula there. Another great thing to follow something up with that would be the HDR multi-scale transform, which is one of the wavelet tools in Pixinsight, and it can do a really nice job of really compressing bright areas. We'd normally want to do that with a mask, so we're not dinging any of the brighter stars, but you can really get some good detail with that. And of course, you could manipulate this further with curves. I'll just clear this out. and go to my lightness channel should be. I could take a reading in the background sky, put a control point. In fact, I need a real-time preview to do this. Get a control point in that background sky, maybe darken that up a little bit. And all right, looks like I should actually be in the RGBK. There we go. At this point, being non-linear, put a control point in that background sky, kind of build up the brightness in the midtones, and then maybe compress those highlights. But that's down and dirty and doesn't look fantastic. But that would be your go-to for combining very bright cores with extended data.
I have a question, Warren, if you don't mind me asking. What was that process called again? Not the H, not the
The gradient.
It's in the wavelets. No, sorry, it's in the gradient domain, and it's called gradient HDR composition.
Okay. So let's say, for instance, you are imaging M42 and you collect a good amount of data using 5-minute exposures, 10 hours using 5-minute exposures, and that's going to blow out the core completely. But let's say you only have about 15 minutes of, 15-second exposures, and that's going to provide you, nice dynamic range given the short exposures, but your image is going to be noisy as well. If you combine the two, I'm not sure how that process works. Will the noisier of images affect the final image?
Right. So in a case like that, where, I often get questions about combining data, during the pre-processing calibration part, I wouldn't do that. In a case like that, I would make 2 separate master files and, process them accordingly, if they need DBE, if they need noise reduction. And then early on in the process, and it could be linear, it could be nonlinear, you'd have to experiment, but just compositing like we just did here, just compositing that core into the quality good signal of the longer exposures. Yeah.
Awesome.
WBPP offers us that exposure tolerance, right, where we can take exposures of very different times and either choose to combine them into one master file or have them as separate masters, right? And so we really wouldn't want the noise of a 15-second exposure. But in this case, that 15-second exposure is filled with such bright signal, the trapezium, right, that it's not going to be very noisy. But yeah, I would definitely keep 2 separate masters and composite them at some point in the workflow.
And now let me just ask a question. With this HDR composition program, I've actually never used this one. I've used the other one. And it's required where the longer exposure is on the top and the lower ones are on the bottom, so it's done the right way.
Right.
Is this the same thing where the longer exposure needs to be on the top, or does it matter?
I tested it, and in this particular case, it didn't matter.
Okay.
Yeah, it didn't matter.
Okay. Very good. Very good. All right. Well, we got some other questions from. This is going to be an interesting question from my friend Eddie in the Pittsburgh area. I'm a newbie here, so with so many icons, how do you decide on which ones to use?
Well, you said Eddie?
Eddie, yeah.
Yeah, so again, Eddie, these are literally chronologically set up for me and very close to the type of workflow that I would do. And I'd be glad to come back and do a walkthrough or whatever. But honestly, if you look at this, and I know you're thinking from the perspective of being really new at this, right? But imagine that, I've done my pre-processing up here. I've got my masters put together, and then I'm ready to start post-processing. pretty much. I've got my STF placed right up here. I'm going to need that. That's critical to be able to see what I'm doing, right? Because a linear image is by nature very dark, right? And so we can really get a nice visualization on linear data. And then it's off to the races. You know, if you're working monochromatically, you're going to use channel combination to combine your RGB. If you're working with a one-shot color camera, you'll skip that. You may need to crop your image. Most images are going to need background modelization, which is just a fancy way of saying evening out the illumination of across the field, getting rid of any vignetting that's left after flat fielding, getting rid of any light gradients that are in there. And then we can calibrate our color to start getting really nice color. We want to do linear noise reduction so that we don't have to take the noise with us when we stretch. So again, very chronological, and it's much easier, you know, either taking one-on-one lesson with myself or Ron Breacher, or getting into some of the good videos of Masters of Pixinsight or Adam Block, which is a little bit more complex, or the books. They're going to, you know, we're going to explain to you the chronology of what you're doing and why you're doing it. And of course, most everything starts with pre-processing or reduction or calibration, whatever you want to call it. And these days, many of us are using the somewhat automated weighted batch pre-processing script, where we load up our bias dark flat light frames or whatever you have for calibration. And by fairly simple controls, you can have the script knows what to do and when to do it. So it's a great way to start. Of course, as we show people, this is a script, it's a JavaScript, and so it's not a process unto itself, but what it's doing is it's using processes like image calibration, image integration to, you know, combine everything together. If you have a one-shot color camera, you're using debayer in the background to color convert. You're using star alignment under image registration. So all of these actual full featured processes are being used in a limited way by the scripts to get the job done. And so it's really great as a newbie, especially, not to have to interface with all of these individual processes. And frankly, WBPP is getting so powerful that there's really not much compelling to want to interface with the processes themselves when the scripts do such a good job.
Yeah, the scripts are
Well,
really
yeah,
good.
and as you can see, Eddie, I mean, this is just a handful as compared to all of the processes and all of the scripts, which there's lots of them hiding in here. So there's a ton of stuff. But again, you know, let folks like us give you the keys to the kingdom, connect the dots for you, show you where you should start, the things that you'll be using on a daily basis, the things that you really don't need to interface with. If you're an astrometry or a photometry person, if you are annotating your images with plate solving and such, yeah, there's lots of stuff there. But for what I would call a pretty picture imager, someone whose main discipline is to really just produce pretty images, pretty pictures, it's a lot less complicated than you might think. And we've shown people in 10 steps that we can produce a really nice looking image. And you know, I'm looking at Dan's box there with a beautiful grayscale image. The hydrogen alpha images, color can be rather complicated. It's 3 and 4 times the bother, and you really have to work hard. I had a line in the book, paraphrasing Bad Company, said, "Good luminance gone bad," right? And so, yeah, color can get much more complicated, but you can do that type of beautiful grayscale presentations very quickly in your learning process. And anything we can do to help you, we're here for you.
Yeah, well, you're missing a little something behind my head, Warren, and this is actually a joke photo, to be honest with you. Now, if I move my head a little
Yeah.
bit,
Oh, I see it. Yeah.
Is that a
so
velociraptor
no, that's
No,
Jar Jar Binks
from
from.
Star Wars.
So,
Okay.
somebody on Facebook said something about my picture and said, "Oh my God, it looks like Jar Jar Binks." So I couldn't resist. I cropped the head off and I made it black and
All right.
white and I just shoved it in there and I
There
put it
you
back.
go.
So,
Yeah, I
so
think years ago Rogelio had a little horse head that had a moving mouth or something too.
that's
Got it.
funny. That's funny.
Yeah.
You do have a couple of questions coming across. Um, Eric, who's being sick boy over there, he just from what I heard, he got his flu and COVID shot at the same time, so he's
Mm,
feeling the effects of that.
okay.
But we wish Eric and just a fast recovery. So feel better, buddy. Um, and he wants to know a little bit about pixel math. He knows it's a bit intimidating, but does any of the new modules of the Masters of PI touch on like digging deep into pixel math?
I I don't believe so. I don't believe so. You would find more on pixel math in the book inside Pixinsight. You would find more in the IP4AP.com tutorials. But as I tell a lot of people, I'm not a math guy. I got unfortunately derailed really, really young in a rather traumatic way and never caught back up again. So I use, what I would call canned expressions, which I pick up from users that are more skillful than myself. For instance, this is a great way to add hydrogen alpha into a broadband image. This is a great for expression for cleaning up the dark modeling, the peppery stuff
Um,
in a background sky. And I certainly can add and subtract, right? And so much of what I do with pixel
Warren,
math.
I'm sorry to cut you off, Warren. I think your screen is frozen.
Oh, well, you know what I did? I turned it off, I think.
There you
Um,
go.
There you go.
yeah,
Yeah,
sorry, guys.
no, it's okay. That's
Let's
okay. I
go
was
back
I
to
wasn't
that.
sure if you were showing anything else on Pixinsight or
I was trying to, yeah. So,
there you go. Now you
um,
got it.
there
Okay.
we go. So I was mentioning, okay, so I've got a couple of really nice expressions that I use often. This is the one for getting rid of mottle in the background sky. This is one for adding narrow band into broadband images. And so, I'll collect expressions that I'm not necessarily capable of crafting myself. Ron is great at that, by the way. But as
Yeah.
I said, I can certainly add and subtract. And many a time, I am simply, and this isn't a good example of it, but with masks, let's say, I am simply doing addition. I am sometimes subtracting, one mask from another to get a particular result, taking the stars out of a what we would call lightness mask, a
Yep.
brightness range mask. Multiplication, I showed in the book, and it's very easy. There's a way to use a max operator of two different images, and of course you have to put the correct image names in here, and you can do that as you saw through the expression editor instead of typing everything out, just choosing them here in the image area there. And that would compare two images to one another, and the brighter of each individual one of those millions of pixels would win the day. So I'm often using a max operator or a min operator, which would be a minimum, the dimmer of the two things. So pixel math can be intimidating. Yes, some guys can use it very profoundly and do that. That's not my path because, again, I'm pretty limited. But again, just knowing how to do the four basic functions and collecting a couple of cool expressions to get the job done, you'll have no trouble at all.
Yeah. No, Rom was gracious enough to share his fixed black pixels
Right, and
script
that's
on.
exactly what I'm talking about
Yeah.
with the model. Yep.
Yeah, so you just add a little bit more gray to the black, and it's a really cool expression when you get into it. When you
It is,
yeah
and it's important because you sometimes, no matter how careful you are with your noise reduction, just because you don't have enough signal, sometimes you wind up with those artifacts, and they ain't pretty.
yeah
And I saw a really good video today by Noodle Van. If people are familiar with Hong Kong's Noodle Van, he showed something really nice on YouTube for getting rid of walking noise. And there's so much out there. Again, you have to use discretion. There's some really good presenters on YouTube, and there are some folks that just love to record their screen and show you what they just learned from somebody else. And sometimes they don't quite get it right, and sometimes they lead you down rabbit trails where things just aren't necessary, or a big time waster kind of a thing. Um, and it's hard to have discretion when you're new at something. Once you understand a decent amount of something, you do develop that discretion. You go, nah, that's not necessary, or that's not for me, or I have a better way of doing that. And again, there's a lot of great content out there, but it's really difficult to connect those dots and get a repeatable workflow that makes sense.
yeah yep
I can tell you from my background as a professional photographer, I cut my teeth in film, and dark rooms, and my father worked for Kodak for 30 years, and he used to take me
Wow.
down into the dark room, when I was just a kid. I can still smell the chemicals. I learned the basic principles, of photography before I got into anything of the fancy techniques. And I think that's one of the things that people they get tripped up on, is that they want a technique and they forego the basics, the principles of why you're doing something instead of just how you're doing it.
Right.
And I
Yeah.
think that we need to be helping people to focus on the principle behind the
Right.
technique, so that you have
Right.
a foundation. So if that technique changes, the principle ain't ever going to change,
yep
Yeah.
right? The
That's
technique might
that's
change, but the principle won't.
that's all true. I've used an expression in presentations. Say it's not the plane, it's the pilot, right? So it's not Pixinsight, it's not Photoshop. They're tools, but the pilot needs to
Yeah,
understand visually where they're going. And that takes
yeah,
time. I tell people, look, they need to study good images by people that are accepted to be good imagers. Look at the level of sharpness and
yeah,
smoothness and color saturation and the feel of it, the contrast of it. And even if you can't articulate, oh, this is this or this is that, I think the eye and the brain, just like AI, our brain starts to get trained to recognizing what makes a good image from a mediocre image. But it's very daunting at first. If you don't have, for
yeah,
instance, your background in photography, or you're not an art person, because we do get a lot of very technical people in the hobby, a lot of IT, a lot of programmers, a lot of engineers, doctors, et
yep,
cetera, et cetera. And some of them just don't feel confident in that artful realm. And you can spend, as we know, hundreds of thousands of dollars on gear,
oh yeah
have really good data, but you might really not know what to do with it. And we've seen that time and time again. I used to, at AIC in particular, when I would first start trying to hawk my old DVDs, and you would see guys mostly at that point. Of course, thankfully, we have a lot more women in the hobby, but a lot of
hmm
older guys with gaga eyes staring at what I call these sexy anodized things, and saying, I want that plane wave, I want that FLI or that apogee. Well, FLI is not
yeah
is a black box, but back when apogee was still with us, those beautiful anodized colors and everything. And so people would get drawn to that and ignore your $25 disc that could really show them how to get processing and really start
Oh yeah.
creating beautiful images. I also think about my old friend Craig Stark from Stark Labs, right?
Hmm.
PhD guide and nebulosity. I haven't seen him in years, but he did a presentation at a conference years ago called the $40,000 difference. And it was just what we're talking about, showing, dog's breakfast image that was taken with $40,000 worth of gear, and then a really nice image of M51 that was taken with a Cinta mount and maybe an Orion ED telescope and a DSLR. So much of this game, as we know now, right,
Yep.
all of us do, is in that processing. And again, when you look at data, it's really hard to get into the mind of a rank beginner who doesn't even know, is my data good? So you have to really kind of bring people along and say, look, your stars are round, your focus is really good.
Yeah.
You're finally there. You're finally able to get good data. Maybe see if you can up the exposure time, or at least total exposure time, and then start trying to, and so I have a couple of clients that have mentored with me one to one, and nowadays they just shoot me an image and say, how is it, what do you think? And I think of this one fellow, Steve, who always says, I'll tell him I'm on my phone, but you need to do this, that, and he just can't understand how I can evaluate. But that's almost 20 years, I guess, now, of looking at this stuff, and just getting a gut feeling for, that's good, that could be better, that color's off, you've gone too far down this route. And that's really something I think you really need to develop. I think of another friend, Mike Miller, who would always say to me, well, I'm not an artist like you, Warren. I'm not an artist like you, Warren. But he's an APOD imager. He's a multiple APOD imager because he learned. I mean, he learned I'm not coming up with a good word, but he had to train his eye to be able to replicate what he saw in good images. Some people just, bam, they get it very quickly. And let's face it, there are so many good resources today, and there are some younger people getting in, and the equipment is that much better, that it's staggering how good many people are getting very quickly.
Yeah.
So whereas I feel it took 10 to 12 years, excuse me a sec, 10 to 12 years to be good, I see people in 2 to 3 years now that are savvy really getting
Yeah.
very good.
Yeah, it's one of the things, Warren, that always drives me crazy when I spend a lot of time down at the beach, and I'll do sunset photography and this and that, and a lot of times I'll have an iPad running with images that I've done over the years, and people will look and they're like, "Man, if I had a camera like yours, I could take pictures like that too." I say, "Yeah, okay." Yeah, that's like saying, if I had the oils and brushes that Monet had, I could paint like him too.
Right,
It,
right,
it's just
right,
it's not. I try to get this across to people that it's not the
right.
camera. You can do an amazing thing with just one of these.
Yeah,
You know.
yeah, yeah. And I'll put in a plug for our friend Jerry Rodriguez, who just
Yep.
published an ebook on Amazon all about taking uh, evening and nighttime photos with a smartphone.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
Mm-hmm.
available. I
Exactly.
think it's still just $1.99 on Amazon. You should be able to find
Yeah.
it. Jerry
Nice.
Rodriguez, Lodriguss. Amazing photographer
Yep.
also. Jerry's just an
Yeah.
amazing photographer. But you're right. But by the same token, the equipment is getting so much better
Oh
that
yeah.
whether it's terrestrial, landscape, or whatever, one shot with a digital DSLR, you had to be a master in the film era to really produce a really nice, contrasty, good photograph, right?
Yeah.
Probably had to print it yourself if you really wanted it to be good. And so, some of, it's like the buggy whip thing. It's like some things are
Mm-hmm.
rapidly being replaced, and I know there's some companies working on AI, artificial intelligent processing uh, things. And so at some point, yeah, those things are
Yep.
probably going to start turning out pretty good images.
Yeah.
and some of us will have to find different lines of work.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Um,
why I was such a fan of I am such a fan of Ansel Adams. You know, I mean, I
Right,
look at what he did, you know,
right,
100 plus years ago
yep.
with,
right,
you know, the equipment that he had. The man was an
right,
With a
absolute
Brownie.
master.
right,
Yeah,
right,
I mean, he was a master at
right.
you know, dodging and
Yeah,
burning and waiting, and the principles. He had a mastery of the principles,
right,
and I think that if we can instill that into people, you know, to build a foundation of principles, then the techniques will just they'll come along.
right. And Ansel, I read his bio not too long ago, and wasn't shocked to find that he
Incredible.
was a concert pianist and had pursued being a professional concert pianist in his
Yeah.
earlier years. And we do find so much crossover between astroimaging,
Oh,
musicianship,
That,
um, and,
that,
no
and
doubt
and as
about it.
somebody once told me at a conference, I said, "Oh my gosh, this guy does this and he does that, and his hobby is this, and he's a professional at that." And I was kind of like a new babe, babe in the woods. And they said, "Well, Warren," they said to me, and I wish I remember who it was. They said exceptional people tend to excel at more than one thing, and
yep.
that bell went off in my head at that point because there
Yeah.
really are some amazing people in our circle of astro imaging.
So that's
Yeah.
that's
Cool.
something that a lot of people may or may not know about you is that you are a musician and why don't you talk a little bit about that? And if you're done with Pixinsight, can you switch over to
Yeah.
your
So we can
camera?
see you.
Yeah, sure. Let's see. So I just have to. Do I have to? What do I do?
You click.
Toggle the.
There you
There.
go.
There it is.
There it is.
Again, every Tony Hallis and Wolfgang Promper, and I'm just naming guitarists.
Mm-hmm.
Hal, who's the fellow? Hap Griffin,
Hap Griffin, sure.
uh, Rick Hedrick from Plane Wave, Tim, formerly with Apogee. I mean, just guitarist after guitarist after guitarist. A lot of musicians, but mostly guitarists. And there's just some interesting mix there. Astro imaging really saved my life. I say that it was a wonderful 10-year uh, where I was really exclusive to astro imaging. It kind of saved me from a crash and burn in music. I've had the New York City um, epoch and the Nashville era, and so yeah, I've done a lot. I don't want to bore our audience with it. I was started as a classical clarinetist. I started playing with school friends in rock bands by probably 16 years old. Did the New
In a
York
rock
City.
band with a clarinet or with
No, yeah, yeah, I should have. Yeah, right. The good old licorice stick. Yeah, switched to saxophone. Switched to sax. Fairly early on. Played flute. Sang as a lead singer. Did the Jersey Shore cover band thing. Was on the road with one of the original Flamingos in a
wow.
traveling group for a couple of years. Did the punk new wave thing in New York City in the early '80s. Moved to Nashville in '92, writing modern commercial country, trying to hit it there. Got close, always close to the shiny brass ring. Never quite.
Yeah.
I could send you a link with an interesting read with all of the crazy things that I've been in and out of. But play in a rock and roll band with a young 29-year-old, very talented guy now, and do a contemporary smooth jazz independent thing myself. Have played in blues bands, rockabilly
Mm.
band, just done a lot of different stuff. And but like I said, it was really out of Nashville that I started the hobby of astro imaging. And when when that didn't work out to my satisfaction, I really looked at myself and thought, I'm getting pretty good at this, and I can teach, and I can produce videos, and I can write. And so it really was a great lifesaver. Met a lot of wonderful people, friends, acquaintances through astro imaging, and then kind of amazingly enough, kind of got back to it just a few years ago, music. And, it's definitely taken a big piece of my heart back again, but I still enjoy teaching and getting that occasional, really into galaxies, really into southern sky objects that are a little bit rarer
Hmm.
seen. And when I can get my hands on something like that, there's still that excitement to, really see what deconvolution and techniques can bring out of it. It's still really cool.
That's cool. Well,
Yeah,
we do have
Warren, I always think of Brian May, and
Right. Sure.
Ryan May, sure.
he absolutely amazing freaking astrophysicist,
Amazing
but
guitarist.
yeah, guitarist for Queen. I mean, holy cow,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
And,
you
and
talk
it's
about diverse.
and Kevin Kawhi, anybody know Kevin is with Celestron for many years, and Kevin's got a real love for music, and he's
Yeah,
kind of been a Celestron ambassador, where he's befriended a lot of music personalities. He's pretty tight with the Stevie Nicks band, and um,
yeah.
and has hung out with, and he'll set up telescopes, and they'll observe, and it's pretty neat. There's a lot of crossover.
That's awesome. You set up 120 Esprit next to a Marshall stack, and
Right,
just
right.
just
No, it's
watch the
it, it's very
optics.
interesting. It's very interesting. There really is a lot of crossover. I always thought about writing an article, perhaps, about all the musicians that I've come across in imaging. And again, for whatever reason, so many guitar players and some really high level, really good musicians. It's just crazy.
I'm
Yeah.
definitely not a high level, but I'm not a bass player, so haven't played in a long time. But it's always
Yeah.
been I was, and I know where you are going on a little bit of a music tangent, but um, I was spoiled when I was playing music because I always played with people that were way better. I had no business playing with these guys, and I was like the Michael Anthony playing with Eddie Van Halen. It was like,
Right. Yeah.
that's what it was. That's the best I can put it together. I had the voice and range of a Michael Anthony, so it worked out. But other than that, I played in a band for a long time, did a cover thing. I had the pleasure of opening for Andrew Dice Clay once, and played at CBGB's twice. So I was happy with that.
Yeah,
So yeah,
that's
so
cool. I one of my favorite stories, CBGB, was playing with Ronnie and the Jitters, which was my band at the time, and got off stage, and Clem Burke, right, Blondie's drummer, grabs me, and he says, "My sister's doing a showcase next. You got to go play with her." Because he was producing his sister's band. I'm like, well, I don't know anything. So no, you'll do great. You go. So yeah, I played with her. It was
that's awesome.
just one of
Awesome.
those really neat stories, and I have quite a few of those close encounters. It's
That's
neat.
that's pretty cool. But we do have questions lining up in the chat box.
Yep,
Yeah.
sure.
Um,
Right.
I know that Beatrice had a question. She got a big red question mark there. Um,
Well, that's way
what?
back up in the chat list.
Yeah. So where did it go? So
It's way up there.
it's when I stack images with different exposures like M42 and WBPP, I get one master light of each exposure. Is it possible to let PI, and I know you kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, is it possible to let PI integrate those different master lights automatically into one master integration image?
Yep. Yep, it's very simple, but it's actually rather recent that it was included. Just look on your lights tab in WBPP and you'll see a little box at the top that says exposure tolerance. And so if you've got 300-second exposures and 180-second exposures, 300 minus 180 is what,
20?
120. you put 120 in as your exposure tolerance, and everything will be integrated into a single master file.
Huh.
Nice.
There you go.
Yeah.
I
Of
told
course,
you, I
if you
learned
had,
something new.
and it might not be best practice to include really short exposures, but then again, the weighting, right? WEIGHT, the weighting is so sophisticated that those short frames will be given a lot less contribution to the stack than the strong frames will. So probably okay to throw them all into the stew pot.
Okay.
Hmm.
I saw another question in there. Is it correct? Astro Notebook, I thought had a question, if I remember right. I did get one on email. I forgot it though off the top of my head. We were talking about Brian May and music, and I got kind of sidetracked. There was a second question and a third question. Let's see. Let me look through it. People are
Well,
talking
while you're
about.
looking, let me
Yeah,
ask
go ahead.
something more. And
Yeah.
you're talking about objects up
Oh,
in
there it is.
in the heavens that are really bright, like Orion, and it's different parts, or M31, so on and so forth. There aren't a lot of them up there. Most of what we're going for is really really dim stuff. But the stuff that is bright, where you want to capture the darker details in the dust lanes and things, but you've got a really bright core, you know, it, I've been kicking around this idea, with doing
Yeah,
stuff in
I know where you're
camera.
going.
Yeah. Is there anything that you can do to capture that data in camera before you even get to your computer? I was thinking using an ND filter. Now I don't know if that's crazy. It might be crazy, but using something like that to get the details of the core in camera before you actually take it into your processing.
Well, you can certainly try the shorter exposures. I mean, that makes sense to
Mm-hmm.
me if it's a bright enough core. But also, if we're really careful with our stretching, with our delinearizations, right? Then we have that HDRMT tool, and we can really compress those areas. And we find that they're not really saturated, right? As long as they're not truly blown out, truly saturated, we can recover a lot of that detail with HDRMT. The one thing I wish we did have with histogram transformation, where we do most of our stretching, if you can picture that curve, that mid-tone slider gets dragged up to lower the white point. Um, and you do get what I would term a flat to the finish type of curve. But I wish that we had a way of putting a third control point on top where we could really compress those areas on the stretch so that we don't, risk losing that core detail. Another alternate is something I mentioned, that masked stretching is terrific for maintaining those cores as an alternate to HT, to histogram transformation.
There's the question on where I lost it again. Astronomy Notebook. Would it be possible later on to talk about how to use the linear StarNet script? I think it's just StarNet.
Well, that's interesting, no, because I actually just came across that um, today or yesterday, and that was written by Eduardo, who's also a Pixinsight ambassador. And so I ran a test, and I can show it real quick if we want to. But yeah, the linear StarNet uses StarNet, but is geared for doing it in the linear before the stretch. I actually liked my result with good old StarNet after a mild stretch.
Okay. All right. Um, and I had a question
But if
on.
you're but if you're processing narrowband and you know you want the stars out from the get-go, yeah, you could certainly use the linear version and take it out. But again, I kind of I liked what I got stretching and then using StarNet.
Warren,
And it
you
worked
said
great.
you don't.
And I go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was gonna say you said you don't often use StarNet and your narrowband processes, right?
Well, I said in general, I don't use StarNet a lot because again, I'm more of a Galaxy guy. I certainly do nebulae. I certainly do narrowband, but high res galaxies is my thing. But I've certainly used StarNet, and it works really well. Um, I happen to have an NVIDIA card, and I don't know if you've seen. There's a way to really speed um, StarNet up if you have
through the
an
GPU.
NVIDIA card, and we
Hmm.
can point you to a link if you like. But it's rather it takes about 45 seconds for me, which is I think is pretty good, and
It's
it
pretty
really
fast.
does a nice job. And honestly, I'll plead ignorance. I didn't realize that we could train the neural network to get even better performance um, from StarNet. So if we would have the time to run StarNet on the same image, what's called epochs, right? Epochs,
Mhm.
um, like 20 cycles, the author Nikita says, and you can really train your StarNet to work even better.
Nice.
But it does great.
And I did have a question on email. It was about pre-processing. Let me just give it 1 second. Um, I noticed that when I'm pre-processing, I'm putting my bias, my flats, my darks, and my lights in there. Even though I have the time is equal for my darks and my lights, I find that I sometimes have to optimize, have the box checked, optimized in order to get the green check marks across. So I guess the main question is, why do I need to optimize my darks if they're the same exposure time
Right,
as my lights?
right. I'd really want to look at that, and see if I see anything. But optimization's really never a bad thing, because it can actually kind of micro scale a dark frame to a light frame
Okay.
if there's any variations at all. But I'd be curious. I'm not sure why that's happening.
Yeah, it was just they were saying, and I noticed it the other day as well when I was playing around with. I had a brain meltdown with one shot color or with these guys, and it's just I'm ready to take my 294. I'm ready to sell it and just go mono all day. I'm done. I'm done.
Mhm.
But whatever the case may be, I was having a brain fart with that, and I did notice that, and I was actually doing it with a friend of mine, who just did some LRGB on M101, and same thing. I had to do, even though he took 4 minute lights and 4 minute darks, I had to check that optimized dark in order for me to have
Was
no
it was it the very latest? Was it
10.10.
2.3 with the very new 1.8.8 dash 10?
I, yeah.
Because I have a really good friend, Mike Selby, who's a heck of an imager, and he wrote me the other day and said that he was finding that he needed to optimize where he hadn't in the past. So could it be a bug? Perhaps, but I also noticed in the material that there was some change affected to calibration that would affect the optimization routine. And so I'm not exactly sure at this point if it's a
Okay.
problem or not. One thing I've noticed in the past, and I'm opening WBPP for myself, is on the um, on the calibration tab, or well, I wish I had images loaded in here, but you've got that auto feature to auto select your dark,
Yep.
auto select your bias. Sometimes if you go in there and manually point it to that image, it seems to rectify that.
Yeah, you'll get the little link picture.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. But there may be something a little funky now with optimization. I'm not sure. In the past, we would do it. It really was obviously bias scaling is what it was all about, right? To scale a long dark to be used as a flat dark. Um, but it never hurt to use it on the light frames because, again, it kind of smoothed out some small variations between the darks and the lights.
All right. See that. I thought there was one more question here. Let's see.
Astronomy notebook. Can dark flats be substituted for biases in batch processing?
Can what be substituted
Dark
for
flats.
Can
bias?
dark flats be substituted
Okay.
for biases in batch
All right.
processing?
I got
Astronomy
myself in a
notebook.
lot of trouble on one of the groups a while back because I always insist that it's flat darks. They're not dark and they're not dark flats, right? Flats are lights, and we need darks to calibrate our flats. So they're flat darks, they're not dark flats. And that all we can thank the author of Deep Sky Stacker for that because he's French and he flipped it around on us. But I'll get off my soapbox now. So typically, if we're using flat darks, we're not using bias frames, right? So the most common scenario is the CMOS cameras that don't take good, useful bias frames. So we're therefore taking dark frames that match our light frames, and we're taking dark frames that match our flat frames, aka flat darks, right? So it's typically we're not using bias. So you would use the two sets of darks, and WBPP would recognize the exposure time matches and use the short darks for the flats and the long dark for the lights.
Gotcha.
Bias frame works good for CCD cameras. I think Dan, he has that old
What was that?
Kodak 8300. I think you have that nice Kodak 8300 sensor.
I do. I have it. It's sitting around. Yes, I do.
Yeah,
That was
it was a great sensor.
Hey.
The monochrome was great, and the color was terrible.
Oh, I got the STF from SBig, STF 8300 monochrome with my Astrodons in there, and I love it. I think it's great.
Yeah, no, it's great.
And
great
and you know what? It's so old right now. I can't sell it for like
right.
I couldn't give it to somebody on the street. It's been on it's been on Cloudy Nights for a year.
I hear you. I have an Attic 11,000 that they gave me when I missed. I can't quite remember what happened. Once we got them into the dealerships, they didn't. I've got that 11,000 beautiful monochrome with Astrodon filters and a monster Moog and an electronic filter wheel, and it's been sitting with Terry Hancock at Grand Mesa Observatory in the closet somewhere for like 2 years. I don't know what to do with it, you know?
I don't know. And you know what? You think about it, we always talk about it on the show on how deep this rabbit hole can go. And from a cost perspective, it's like, there's when you want to upgrade, it's just like computers. Things get obsolete fairly quickly. And there's got to be that turnover between new people getting in, trying to get something a little bit cheaper, and you upgrading yours to something more.
Right. And a couple of things occur to me along those lines. You know, that famous expression, law of diminishing returns.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we can spend 10 times as much on equipment to get a 1.25, gain in quality. And we really find that so many things are really good enough. And unless we have absolutely, expendable, disposable income, we really should learn our system. We should learn how to use it and really learn how to make good data with it and really learn how to process that data. I've known guys that maybe had too much money for their own good, and they were just constantly switching out systems. I think they enjoyed the pain of, figuring everything and getting everything to work with it. And that's not easy, guys, right? At all. And they never produced anything, and they never really got to be good processors. So, use what you got, get good, and don't, we mentioned like the C14 thing, right? Like, don't bite
Mhm.
off more than you can chew. Start out with reasonable, focal lengths, and also don't mix everything at once, right? Try to get a good RGB broadband pretty image before you start adding narrowband data into it, and just learn, try to be patient, learn each step. And I think that's the better advice.
So basically, what you're saying is, do not start like the way Scott did.
You said it right. You said it right.
So-
I would be a guy like Scott that would go, yeah, I know everybody says
Yep.
this. You know what? I'm getting it.
Yep.
I'm going for it.
You're gonna lose big, man.
That's the photographer in me. Yeah.
Hey,
Yeah.
Right.
you know what? Let me tell you, when you take that first massive, like when you do that first 10-hour project, it's gonna be ridiculous. It's gonna be awesome, I'm sure. So I can't wait to
You know,
see.
honestly, when I get down to Florida, because I am moving. Oh, and by the way, just a little piece of news on that. My
Oh,
my house actually is now contingency free. Yeah, so
nice.
everything is on track, and we're going to be closing and moving to Florida. So, but yeah, when I get down to Florida, I'm giving very serious consideration to setting that rig up with the Hyperstar, and trying to use that 715 millimeter, to get some good images with that Hyperstar. I'm not 100% sure on that, but that focal length is very attractive, especially at f2, f1.9, f2.
Have you seen the work of J.P. Pecorino?
Ooh, that name
No.
sounds familiar.
Man, he just, I'd see his images here and there on a Facebook group, but it wasn't until just a week ago that it hit me like, oh my gosh, these are hyperstar images, and
Yeah,
they're just fabulous. Just,
yeah,
perfect coloration, artfully beautiful, and hyperstar, which we know can be fussy to dial in, right? But man, oh man, very impressed with him.
yeah. Quiv just put out a video just recently where he had an 8-inch with a Hyperstar, and he was taking
I
pictures
thought it
of
was a six.
the Pleiades.
I thought it
Huh?
was a six
No, no,
inch.
no. I think, is it a six?
I think it's a six. He said it was the best refractor, and it was a 6 inch with the Hyperstar.
It's a
Yeah,
it's a
yeah,
well,
you
no,
got
yeah,
it.
it's an SCT.
Yeah, it's a 6 inch Schmidt.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure.
yeah, and at
Unless
300
if he's got a
millimeter. Yeah.
really small head, because he had his head right next to it, and his head was bigger. So
I had,
Yeah,
I
but
have a, we have a friend.
he was.
We had a friend keep talking about the lazy Greek, and we
Yeah,
pointed out that no, he's the lazy geek.
yeah.
yep, yep. And
He
then
was getting some absolutely phenomenal images with that Hyperstar, the Pleiades.
yeah.
The detail that was coming out of that was
Wow,
just stunning.
nice. Wow,
It's gonna be,
fantastic.
hey, you know what? And again, we keep on going back and forth on the show, probably every show about, some things work for some people and some things don't work for
Right,
other people.
right.
And like you're a musician. I like to bring up golf every once in a while. So even though I don't play a lot anymore, it's like just like we're saying, you can get all this law of diminishing returns. I always use this story of a guy that I met on the golf course. This guy walks up. He's dressed to the T. He's got this motorized cart which moves with a remote control. He doesn't even push his cart. He's got a $1,700 driver with it's ridiculous. And he's getting up there and he's taking these awesome practice swings and it's great. And he gets up there and he does this little waggle and he gets up there and he takes and he's eyeing this ball. He's getting there. He's focused and he takes the best swing he ever took in his life and shanks it. And it
Yep.
just
Yeah,
goes all. I mean, so what
right,
did that $1,700 club
right,
do for you? It did nothing.
right.
And that goes to your
It's
point about saying it's the pilot. not the
It's
plane.
not the plane, it's the pilot.
And
That's what I was thinking about.
Right.
And in my world, the saxophone world, it's, everybody beating, we have the Selmer Kool-Aid people that, the Selmer Mark VI is the greatest saxophone that's ever been made. And of course, it hasn't been made since 1975. And you guys are all idiots, and the Taiwanese stuff is junk. And, it's drinking the Kool-Aid. It's just self-delusion.
yeah,
There are so many good tools out there today, and some things have these names that just entice people, and they feel like they've got to have it. But as you say, Dan, it doesn't make us any better.
no, it doesn't. And the only thing that makes us better is, and somebody said, I think it was George in the chat, practice, practice, practice.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, there's some legitimate limitations with things, right? Like if you're like me and you have these galaxies, I mean, you want a 5 meter telescope to really do them justice. So, thankfully today we've got some of these great hosting facilities where you can join a team, or you can rent, or you can buy data. But most of us are not going to have that 1 meter plane wave at OBSTech. But if that's your thing, you got to find a way to get to that data, even if you can't afford it.
I mean,
go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, we actually did a contest last year where we had a relationship with the guys over at Telescope Live. And we rented the telescope. We said, hey, listen, donate whatever you want. We went out to the members. We got up to about $600 or $700. And we put it all towards the data gathering. We ended up getting about 7 hours worth of data on the Tarantula Nebula.
Yeah.
I forget which ties. It was like a CDK or something that we were using. And it was great. And then Sean was actually... Sean Nielsen was actually one of the donors, and amongst other people. But it was really, really cool to see the different images that came in. We had about 20 or 30 donors that came in that donated like $20 each, and and everything went right to it. And then we had prizes from Camera Concepts, Explore Scientific, and Ron put in 2 hours of his time as a prize. So,
Nice.
So we're gonna do it. I think we're gonna do it again this winter, if we could get any enthusiasm. We tried doing a second round, and not as much enthusiasm as the first. What?
I think you guys had a guy in there named Alex Smith.
I know Alex.
Oh,
Yeah,
I
was we were doing like a 2-hour video tutorial on Pixinsight, and I think the image that we both worked on that he posted came in like second or third place or something.
Alex came in third, and you worked with him?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I'm gonna mess him. I'm gonna call him up. I got his phone number. I know him personally.
Oh yeah. He's a good friend. I like him a lot, actually.
Alex is pretty funny. He's a funny guy.
Yeah, he is. And I met him through 5 Point Scientific. When he was first getting his gear.
Yep.
But we started talking, and he's like, I don't know how to use Pixinsight. So, but yeah, that would be cool to do another money throw in for some data.
Yeah. Well, I know that Peter Myers is going to hook us up with Christian Sass, Dr. Sass, over at iTelescope. And so that may be another option moving forward. So that's going to be kind of interesting.
So, Warren, I'm curious. You with the trio of you guys. You've got that Father, Son, Holy Ghost kind of thing going on there. Is there anybody in the, or maybe a couple of people that are in the astronomy world that you see as rising stars that have a really good handle on this, that you can say, yeah, their work is really, really good, and we recommend, listening to them.
Gosh, the thing that's occurred to me, as I said before, you're seeing so many fabulous images anymore, right? There's just so
Mm.
many good practitioners out there. Uh, but I think you're talking about people that are teaching. Is that
Hmm.
what we're?
Or
Yeah,
content providers, or people that are just, they're sharing what they're doing,
right. I
and on the
I
internet.
really haven't looked. I haven't looked closely at YouTubers.
Hmm.
Um, I know that Trevor Jones, right? We're going to
Hmm.
actually have him at AIC, and he does great job with equipment uh, reviews and mostly Photoshop based processing. Pixinsight, you probably would want to look at the PI website, look at who the ambassadors are. But as far as people that are actually instructing, I mean, other than ourselves and Adam Block, as far as I know, nobody's doing commercial video tutorials. We talked about a couple of books, right? Rogelio's Mastering Pixinsight, and my Inside Pixinsight was getting a bit long in the tooth now, but very, in its day, it was really the gospel according to Juan, I used to call it, right?
Hmm.
And then there's the Chris Woodhouse book, which is quite good, and I forget
Oh yeah,
the name of that title. Um, but
love Chris's
again,
stuff.
but again, I think a lot of the problem is people get on YouTube thinking that they will be able to put all of the elements together into a logical workflow and really take something A to Z. Or sometimes you see things that are great that are A to Z, but as you said before, Scott, they don't give the background or the depth of understanding where you mimicked it from A to Z, but now the second you run into any variables in another data set or a different type of object, you don't know what to do because you don't really
Right.
understand. And again, I'm not talking about depth, deep understanding of, this, Marquardt algorithm, noise analysis, MRS.
Sure. Sure.
I'm not talking about that level. I'm just talking on the level of this slider does this and that
Hmm.
button does that. And and if we have that understanding, we can do a good job. But yeah, I'm not, as I said, my mind has really been very immersed in contemporary smooth jazz lately, trying to advance the cause there with our singles and such. And so I've been a little tuned out on astrophotography, although over the course of the last few weeks, been doing a whole lot more processing again. And with the release of the new version, digging in for writing some new tutorials for the websites. But I don't really know, I can't really say this guy does a great job. I mean, Sean, you've mentioned a couple of times,
Yep.
Oh yeah.
I understand it, really learned largely from Ron.
Yes.
And so Sean should be pretty solid in his presentations.
Yeah.
But I've
Yeah.
seen some real doozies, and there are some sites out there that they just make it too complicated. We don't have to use deconvolution to make a good image. In fact, I recently was trying to get Juan to take a look at deconvolution for some problems that some of us have observed. And Juan was very dismissive of deconvolution in the first place. He's like, he was
Mhm.
open to change because he said, I wrote it 12 years ago. I'm open to looking at it, but it's not that important. Well, I would disagree. I mean, for the average user, it really isn't. But again, if you're doing high resolution work and you really want to bring out that incredible dust lane detail in those galaxies, you really need some good deconvolution to begin with. And I think we have a little bit of a problem at present with it. So hopefully we make some progress there. But again, sites that like, no, you must do this and you must use just what is the gradient, the new gradient thing? um,
Gradient
that name.
noise.
It always escapes me. Um,
What was
I
that?
won't go fishing for it
No,
now,
it's brand new.
but it just doesn't have to be that hard. In fact, if you're brand new, check out easypixinsight.com, right? Not easy, but easy, EASY, pixinsight.com. It's a little bit long in the tooth now too, because I did it a couple of years ago before WBPP took over BPP, but there's free data there that you can run through BPP, follow my very basic instruction, and just with again within a few steps, you'll make a nice looking image, and then you can take it as complex and as deep as you want as you advance. But again, some of these sites are so defeating because they convince people, oh my gosh, I need to understand all of these fairly complex things immediately, and
Yeah.
that's not a good thing.
Yeah, you're at the 301 course when you haven't even gotten past the 101. I understand that.
Right.
Yeah, I have to just put a plug in for myself. I've watched the Pixinsight for newbies that you guys have done. It's fabulous. You know,
Thank
you really do a good job of helping people. The other thing that I don't think has been hit on tonight is you like on that when you shared your screen, your icon list, all of that stuff and the data sets and things like that. It's all available with a download.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think a lot of people need to know that, you know, that it's more than just sitting in front of a screen, that you guys are actually supplying stuff,
Right.
tools that you can use. And I think that's
Right.
really, really important, especially for
Thanks.
somebody that's
Yeah.
brand new.
Yeah. That's great. Data and tools are supplied, and even though the recorded workshops are really good, if you can join us on one of the live ones, you can ask questions in real time,
Yep.
and one of the instructors will be answering in the chat box while the other guy is presenting. So thanks. I mean, Ron and I started out doing live classes pre-COVID. We were in Dallas and LA and Buffalo and Chicago, and they were great. They were very immersive, really personal experiences and such. But of course, COVID kind of um, put a
Killed
kibosh
all
on
of
that. And
us.
yeah, frankly, though, now we can reach more people for a lot less money without
Hmm.
having to travel and hotels and all of that. So $35 per class, right? Unlimited access to the videos, and just yeah, I thank you for that. It's a good place to learn, and we enjoy teaching, and we love turning the light on for people.
Yeah, because
You know, you guys are doing a great job. You really are.
it's a huge asset, man. It's really helped me a lot personally because I'm still overwhelmed with Pixinsight. I mean, it's like this big monster that's coming to
Yeah.
chomp my head off.
Well,
And
well, if it's any consolation, we get there too sometimes. We just kind of feel like we've mastered something, and then they come up with something new, and it's something new to learn. But at the
Here,
end of the day,
have this
like I
wrench.
said before, it's about results. If you're getting, and at the end of the day, it's the look. If you're getting the visual look of what you're going after,
Yeah.
you don't necessarily have to feel compelled to try every single
yeah,
uh, thing in there, right?
the odds are you probably won't because there's just so much in there.
Right.
Um,
Right. I'm
and
thinking
and
I'm thinking of local fuzzy histogram hyperbolization, right? It's like, oh my gosh, it's like, yeah, yeah, it does a pretty cool job of sharpening, but I feel like I can get that with
MLT.
MLT
Yeah.
or LHE,
Yep.
and
Well,
I don't want to sound obstinate, like I'm not going to always try new things. It's just as a processor, I want to be comfortable having a workflow that works for me.
right. And Tarek, who is one of our
Regular.
subscribers from the UAE, had a lovely question. He is a But he's an astro imager, but he primarily concentrates on planetary.
Yeah.
And he basically is saying, when is Pixinsight going to include something about planetary imaging?
Mm.
Um, it's definitely not, it's been mentioned that it would happen at some point, but Juan is always getting deep into something else. I can tell you that the Fourier, I got to look for it, um, does a fantastic job of alignment if you're taking single frames. But as far as competing with a, you know, auto
Auto
stackers,
stacker, yeah.
yeah, I don't.
Fire capture.
Unless that's coming from a third party, I don't see that type of planetary support happening any time soon. Certainly, the wavelet sharpening and the noise reduction tool and the color saturation tools, all of the post processing stuff is all apropos. If you're taking single subs with a non AVI camera, a non-streaming camera, putting those individual subs together for lunar or planetary or solar can be done really well with that Fourier process. I'm trying to think of it, fast Fourier, um, but it does a really good job of doing what I call a correlation alignment between features in a starless image. But yeah, I'm not sure that I see a full support of you know streaming data. Could happen though.
Well, we could always hope.
Well,
We
there's
could
a
always
lot of
hope.
good stuff out there right now.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, there really is a lot of good stuff. I mean, AutoStack does a wonderful job of planetary. Now, I've given up on planetary almost as quickly as I've given up on OSC. But it's planetary to me is like a different type of monster altogether. And it takes a really special, different type of person to actually do that planetary imaging. And I just honestly,
Mhm.
I just don't have the patience for it.
But when I hear
I
C,
find deep sky so much easier than planetary.
I
And
don't think I don't find planetary difficult, and I think Scott's going to get into it big time when he's in
oh
Florida with
yeah,
a C-14.
yep,
Um,
The
but
back
the
of that
tools
scope,
are
you ain't
there.
kidding.
More than anything, it's about seeing. It's
yep.
about seeing.
Yeah.
You
And
just can't get around it.
when you're dealing with New York seeing,
Ugh.
Right,
nope, not at
right.
Portal
Taking
9.
taking nothing away from the incredible planetary images that we
Yeah,
see. I don't know if you guys are familiar with. I'm a little fuzzy today. Jim. Oh gosh, Jim Lafferty. I met Jim
Mhm.
at OPT years ago, and he's a fellow about my age and a really nice guy, and you know, good deep sky imager, kind of back pretty recently, and gotten into PI fairly recently, but he switched to planetary and just doing really excellent work there. I'm trying to think of Marco Lorenzi was a great deep sky guy, and he's doing great planetary. And John Gleason is just unbelievable. John can do it all, man. John is really talented.
yeah. When I
Mm.
finally could put a Schmidt on top, I just got the EQ8R, so I finally got a mount that could kind of handle what I want to put on top of it. So maybe I'll grab Scott's C14 while he's on his way down to Florida and just pop it on there.
Mhm.
But
But
yeah,
Hey, they're
just
only
as
they're only $6,500. Just buy one.
they're only what?
6,500.
Oh, it's not so bad. Well, I'll get it at cost somewhere. So
but just as getting back to Pix Insight and a
yeah,
word of encouragement. Um, as a businessman, I was totally steeped in Photoshop world, and I knew that if I didn't hop on the PI bandwagon when I did, that I'd be out of business. And I remember I was at a NEAC, a Northeast Astro Imaging
Hmm.
conference, and Vicente Perez was over from Spain, from Pixinsight, and Joe DiPasquale, the science imager at the Space Institute, were speaking, and I'm like, this is the coming thing, and I really, I'm not the numbers guy, and I was very intimidated. But again, with good instruction, Harry's Astro Shed
Hmm.
helped me a lot. I had a couple of friends that were already in PI and were helpful to me. When I did the original series at IP Frappy with Rogelio, RBA, he brought that extra bit of information in that really took it over the top. And so my point is, if I can learn it and be considered to be somewhat of an expert today, I believe anybody can learn it. But again, you have to have some artful sense. You have to practice a lot. You have to learn at least the basics of the tools. But don't, what do they say? Eat the elephant one bite at a time, right?
Hmm.
Otherwise, it can be just so overwhelming. It doesn't have to be.
No, no, I'm not trying to, but the great place to start is with you guys in the Pixinsight for Newbies stuff. For
Right.
$35, you got
You can't
two.
beat it.
Nah, you got two Pixinsight ambassadors and Pete bringing up the show. So I mean, it's really a win-win, and it's really putting away by Warren and by Ron that in a way where it's not speaking down, it's speaking at, and treating people with the not so far of the knowledge that you got to have a PhD to do it, but it's at a normal English learning pace where you could sit there and actually learn it at your own and just watch and play with the data that's given to you that follows the lesson, which is even that's huge. The hands-on stuff, it's huge.
Oh
Right.
yeah.
That's great. Thanks so much for those endorsements. We appreciate it very much. And like I said, we enjoy doing it. And of course, you need growth to continue to do what you do. So we need to bring new people in all the time. But we really have built a nice family there. It's a very family atmosphere. People patting each other on the back and joking amongst one another in the chat room, and then also actually paying attention and learning stuff. But yeah, no, it's a very I have a bad habit of always perceiving that people are looking to me to fail, and so I tend to go into things with trepidation. But at some
Hmm.
point, I realized, no, these people are really rooting for us and on our side, and really, like I said, kind of a family. So it's become a nice place.
Yeah.
You just, Warren, you just really described the mission statement of AstroWorld. I mean, that's what we do here. It's almost exactly the same thing. We want to see people succeed. I want to succeed. That's why I hang out with these guys because they're smarter than I am.
Hmm.
you know, and that's something that we've all, we're now up to 8 people that are contributors to Astroworld. The four of us here. We have Tyler who works over at Explore Scientific. We have Eric who's
Jason.
homesick. We got Jason who's running around the country. He's actually the lazy astronomer, not the lazy geek. So,
Right.
so he's
Creek.
called the lazy astronomer. And Pete
He's in Orlando
Myers.
right now.
He's in Orlando working. He's
Yep.
got a gig in
Yep.
Orlando right now, so he's getting 16-hour work days, and he's a mess right now. But and then we got Peter Myers,
Hmm.
formerly from Optical Structures, and now is working at Woodland Hills.
Woodland. Yeah.
And he's joining us. He's actually going to be on the show on Friday, and he's
Yeah.
gonna the return of Pete, and
Yep.
it's gonna be a lot of fun.
And of course, don't forget about our good friend Tegan. I mean, if you
Oh,
doubt his skill, all you got to do is just
He
go
includes
on
me.
to go look at some of his pictures on Astrobin. You'll see real quick how talented an astronomer he is.
I also forgot Simon Lewis too. Simon over in
Yep.
New
Oh,
Zealand.
Simon,
Yeah,
absolutely.
so that's our 8th person.
Tegan,
Yep.
your last name is it Grable?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So I'm connecting now. I remember you. I think we communicated a while back, and you out of the
I
pocket. You
think
had you had a great sense of color, and I remember
Oh,
seeing a
yeah.
video, thinking, well, I wouldn't do it that way, but you really had a great sense of color, and were producing good images very quickly.
You ain't
yeah.
kidding.
Any of my YouTube tutorials are now about 2 years old, and while I keep them up there, those are no longer workflows that I follow.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
but and they've all been improved upon, because if you're doing Pixinsight or astrophotography and you want to get good images, then improving upon everything, data,
Right.
Must.
Right.
the processing
Yeah.
techniques, and your own goals is necessary.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
I've been meaning to put out more YouTube content, but I personally like doing private one-on-one tutorials, things like that, because I find that much
Mm-hmm.
more effective than very generalizing
Right.
Pixinsight. Because
Right.
it's data sets are different, and
Right.
it's much more
Right.
effective learning tool for me.
And
If I
and
were to learn one on,
yeah, and for some
Well, that
people,
he can
they
get
really
anything done is amazing because he's a young father. How many kids you got now? Was it 3?
only 2.
Two
Well,
kids. 2
don't
kids.
rush,
That's still
don't rush
enough.
too much.
That'll keep you busy.
oh, you hit the nail. You hit the nail on the head. Young, so
Yeah.
got plenty of time to just be completely awesome. So
Very good.
me and Scott were like rushing against the clock just to get things done. So
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
yeah.
Well, young or
Oh my
old,
goodness.
No,
still do a
I'm
good
just playing
job.
with you. But yeah, so we got a lot of stuff going on, and again, just like Scott said, the reason why the 8 of us have grown so much over the past literally 2 years, is because we all don't know everything. And we like to teach at least what we know as long as it's correct. And if it's not correct, someone else on the show will call us out on it.
Yep.
But
Guaranteed.
again, it's about showing people and helping other people, especially new people, navigate the landmines that we've all gone through the same thing over and over again, whether it be, man, where does the flattener go in my image train, or what goes first? Does the camera go first? Where does the flattener go? Where does the field? Where does my focus go? All this stuff that's going on, especially with putting
What is
an
back
image train
focus?
together. What is back focus? Yeah, how much of a back
Yeah.
focus do I need? Why do I need
Right.
146
I
on
need
an
back.
edge? And
I need
what
back focus.
do I need back focus
I need
for?
back focus.
What's the difference between back focus and is focus spacing? There's a little
Reminds
bit.
me
Yeah.
reminds me of a club I was playing in Boston years ago, and there was a drunk guy during the sound checks in
Oh,
the
no.
audience, and he liked the girl in the band before a sound checking. He comes out, he says, what can I tell him? Is the tone too high? Should I tell him to turn off the tone? Is the tone too low? Uh, it
Turn
was
up the
funny.
bass. Turn up the bass.
Turn off the tone. And then he says, double shot and a beer chaser. I'm going to get my ass thrown out of here in about 5 minutes. It was funny. It was funny.
That's hilarious. You gotta love those people doing those shows, man. I remember doing them, and there's always one or two that come along in a while that just like, I can't believe that guy said that.
Right, right,
Oh, people will
right,
say and do anything when they've had too much to drink. They
right,
do the stupidest stuff
right.
that makes you just sit back and thank God I've got a phone. I'm
Well,
gonna put this on
Right.
YouTube.
the best
Yeah,
ones
I
are
mean
when
people
they're
do the
completely
craziest
sober.
things. Yeah. Oh,
But all right. Well, we're coming
my
up at
goodness, this has been
2
fun.
hours. Yeah, we're coming up on 2
Yeah.
hours now.
I
It
think
goes
I
by just
will
like that.
be leaving you guys. It's been a long day. If you can notice, I'm blinking a lot, and I get very blinky when I get
And
overtired.
he's not talking about
Yeah.
Pixinsight blink. He's talking about actually blinking.
Right.
I saw when it's kind of his kind of head just kind of went like this.
Yeah, I started leaning my hand a little bit,
You gotta,
but it's been a lot of fun, and I would be happy to do a more organized presentation or something if you'd like to
yeah,
do it again.
absolutely.
Coming into the
Absolutely.
next year, absolutely. That
Yeah, I
sounds
mean,
like a great idea,
just
Warren.
so you know, and the rest of the viewers know, since we're probably gonna get off at the same time anyway, because it's about 2 hours, and that's like
Hmm.
kind of the time limit usually, unless if Sean's on and runs us over three. But what do we got? We got well, Warren's here. Then we got who do we got? We got Henrik from the Star Aid
Yep.
is our next guest. I don't know if you know about Star Aid. It's like a standalone guider. It's a fairly new product.
Very cool.
It seems cool. So the owner is going to give us a rundown on the product on December 10th.
Nice.
Then December 17th, we're going to have Amy Astro
Amy.
come on.
Uh,
So she's
yeah,
coming on to hang out with us.
right.
Sometime first quarter, we're gonna have another trio of people all at the same time. The Prima Luce trio. We're gonna have Filippo,
Yep.
Tom, and the engineer Omar. All three of them are gonna be on a recorded show. So that's gonna be interesting. And I think I found a way where more people can be involved with that show. So more to do about that. Um,
Very cool.
and then hopefully, we'll have yourself and Ron and Pete come back on, as well as Sean and whoever else wants to come on. Like I told you before, we
Yep.
like to do one or two guests a month because, I don't have that many friends, so there's only so many people I could ask. So, but it's a lot of fun doing this, and like you said in the beginning, it's just learning and practice and continue to practice. Get a workflow. Take the Pixinsight, the Pixinsight for newbies, the first one,
Hmm.
and I'm telling you, if you're brand new to this, it will help you along the way. You're gonna get them all. You'll get them all once
Oh
you do
yeah.
it because at $35 a month. I just bought the fourth uh, photons to photos. So and just so you know, the fourth one coming up, I believe November 30th, if I remember, 7 p.m. Eastern. I, I think I saw
That
November
could be
30th.
right. That
I
could
don't
be
want to give
right.
anybody the wrong date, but take a look at the Masters of Pixinsight website.
That is correct. That is correct.
Okay,
You
so
are right.
November
November
30th.
30th is the next
Yep.
one. And if you're saying, hey, you know what, it's the fourth one, don't worry. You could backlog, make an account, go in there, and get 1, 2, and 3 like I did because I missed them. Get 1, 2, and
And
3
got them
and get
forever.
yourself set up for 4.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're
Yep.
branding, in fact, I just changed some of the verbiage today because if you're branding new, do the newbies thing, even though it's really cool to watch a photon to photos, A to Z workflow. We'll be showing things that you probably want to have some background. And
Mhm.
incidentally, if you do
Yeah.
go to Masters of Pixinsight and you go to the IP for AP page, we have 5 of what we call primers, which are video tutorials, which really show just the workspace, where everything hides, how to set things up, and that they're free. And so that'll give you a good background too.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Awesome
So,
tools.
yeah, so we've got a lot of stuff going on. And
Really
again,
appreciate it.
Warren, thank you so much for
Absolutely.
spending your time with us. I know you've had a
Well,
long day, so
Yeah.
we appreciate it. So thank you so much.
thank you. Thank you very much.
All
We'll
right.
see you again.
All right. So everybody, any final thoughts? Tegan, Scott, I know you guys are down there just hanging out. You guys are ready for bed too,
Yep.
it looks like.
Mhm.
Yep. Go buy the stuff. Go buy it. You won't regret it. Just go buy it.
You're very kind. Thank you. Thank you.
$35. Trust me.
It's a steal.
You'll laugh, you'll
forget
cry,
about
you'll
it.
kiss $35 goodbye. I'm sorry. But okay. And on that note, everybody have a good night. And remember, as always, keep imaging, keep educating, and clear skies. And we'll see you Wednesday night next.
Friday.
Friday night. Friday night. Sorry, 2 days at 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern. Have a good night. Take care.
Thanks again, guys.
Bye for now.
Good night,
Thanks,
everyone.
Warren.
Thank you.